In this video, I'll show you how to accelerate hybrid and all distributed teams. And this also works if everyone's in the same building. By the end of this video, you'll know how to keep everyone focused, accountable, aligned, and adapting to change quickly so that they're performing like the very best teams in the world. I'm Scott, and I've gotten to work with some of those great teams, and I've been helping leaders align and accelerate their teams for more than a decade. And now I run ResultMaps, where we make software that helps those same leaders get visibility and acceleration at every level of the company. On this channel, we help leaders just like you accelerate their path, hit their numbers faster and more profitably. So if you're new to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon below so that you're notified whenever we put out a new video on these topics. And if you're already part of our ResultMaps community, if you're using ResultMaps software to accelerate your path, welcome. It's great to see you here. So let's get to the keys of the weekly work session. The first key is to commit to the same time, same day of the week on your calendar every single week. You want to protect that time, and this commitment is going to instantly raise the discipline in your organization. It's going to do that in the obvious way, which is you'll have the time blocked out on your calendar, but it's also going to create confidence for you as the leader to take a step back when different challenges and problems arise to really decide whether they need to be immediately addressed or they can wait until your weekly work session. You'll almost immediately get a sense of, when you realize that you don't have to chase down every problem immediately. And that's also going to allow you to take a step back and look at the different challenges that come up as systems problems so that you don't make the mistake of thinking of every systems problem as a people problem. That first key is really commit to have this time for your weekly work session. This is a time where you're working on the business rather than in the business. And it's a tactical meeting that's going to keep you in sync with your overall strategy. The next key is to record these meetings. By having the recording, it's going to take a lot of pressure off of people's memories, which already stink. That brings us immediately to the next key, which is combine your system of record with your system of action. So what do I mean by system of record? Your system of record is whatever you're keeping your notes on from these weekly work sessions. And a lot of people will use email, but that's really a lousy place to put this. You want to put this in something like maybe ResultMaps, where you can see both what's been decided, what you've covered, and also what you're going to do next. Having that information centralized is really going to free you up and allow you to really focus on what matters most. The next key is set up by everything else we've done, which is once you've got a system of record and a system of action and you've got these recordings, that is a great way to start to limit who's in your weekly work session. These work sessions really need to be limited to the absolute minimum necessary number of people to make decisions and solve problems. And the great news is if someone can't make it because they're on the opposite side of the world and there's just no way for you guys to sync your calendars, well, they have access to the information they need so they can stay in sync and aligned with your team. Now, hopefully everything here is making sense. If this is making sense so far, give me a boom or a yes in the comments. Let me know how you adhere to these principles when you're running your weekly sync meetings or what types of meetings you're running each week. But all that said, let's keep moving forward and get to the next key for your weekly work session. The next key is to lean into this work session as a time management discipline. It can make an immediate impact when you do this, and it's actually not that hard. It's just going to feel uncomfortable while you get accustomed to the process. And so that process has its own keys, and we're going to walk through those step by step now. The first one is to be prepared. For the sections that we're going to walk through right after this section, don't collect that information as you're going through the work session. Go ahead and spend a few minutes before the work session to update the information you need to make sure that the data you're looking at is up to date and doesn't need more research. That's going to allow you to focus your work session on what's really important, which is gauging where we are and what's next. That takes us to the very first section in our agenda. When I say this is a time management practice for these work sessions, we're going to create that time management practice, that time management discipline by having this focused agenda. And the first part of it is just sharing some good news and some wins. So we reserve about 5 minutes so that people start this work session off on a high note. Share a personal win, give a high five, do something positive to lean into what's going to be a very focused work session now. The next section of the agenda is looking at the scoreboard. And this is a quick look, a drive-by or a flyby, however you want to frame it, where you're not discussing your scoreboard, you're merely looking at the numbers. What's on your scoreboard are your key performance indicators, the most important numbers for your business, whatever terminology you want. The simplest way to think of that is a scoreboard. And just like a basketball team in the middle of the game, we're not debating what the score is. The score is what it is. The amount of time left on the clock is the amount of time left on the clock. We're just going to take a look so we know where we are. That'll take about 5 minutes and it'll take us directly into the next section. The next section is where we look at where we are in terms of our overall strategy. What are our big goals, our big targets for the current period we're in? Are we on track? Are we off track? When we look at those things, again, in this flyby format, we're just looking to see where we may need to focus for our problem and issue solving section of our work session. And that's coming up in just a minute. But again, we're going to very quickly look at where we are on our journey to realize our strategy without discussion at this point. In rounding out this first portion of the work session, we're going to look at what we've done, the action items that have been completed since the last work session, and we're going to call out any special wins or headlines that relate to the whole company. Maybe it's an individual getting a certification or doing something special that pushed an initiative over the finish line. Maybe it's something great that happened with a key customer. Whatever it is, you want to interject these right here at the end of this section because it transitions you into the really important time in this work session, which is problem solving and decision making. So if you look at how we've laid out the sections this far in the agenda, we've really given everybody a chance to get set and get a clear look at where we are and where we're trying to go. That allows us to focus the next portion of the work session, which is looking at a prioritized list of the different challenges, issues, and changes that may have come up since the last work session. We're going to spend the bulk of the work session working through those in a very disciplined way. We're going to solve them working from the top down, and we're going to have a hard stop about 5 minutes before the end of our work session. We're going to use time to compress our prioritization. We're not going to try to solve every single challenge that's out there. We're only going to focus on the priorities, and we'll know what they are because you've taken time ahead of the work session to prioritize the different issues and challenges. So working through this section, typically we'll start to produce action items for the week ahead. It will produce maybe some work sessions that you need to do to focus on solving a specific problem. It will produce an action that you've decided to take during this portion of the work session. And you mix those in with the other priorities you've already got from whatever projects you've got going on, whatever initiatives you've got going on. You're trying to keep all these things now in sync with a clear list of priorities that's sequential, that everyone can see. And because you've just gone through your scoreboard and your strategy now, these things are actually going to line up very well with those priorities. And if they don't, that's going to be visible because you're keeping all of this visible, which is our next key. Keep these things visible where everybody can see them. Don't rely on conversational problem solving. You can totally have a conversation, but keep the results of that conversation visible, or you're going to fall victim to our inability to recall information and our inability to read minds. Those are two of the biggest problems we have as humans. So don't rely on a conversation to solve this. Keeping these things centralized and in this work session format is going to prevent you getting lost in a rabbit trail of conversations that go on endlessly. So having this time blocked out like this, where the biggest portion is solving problems, and then you're going to summarize the prioritized list of actions to take for the next week, that is going to have everyone on your team completely dialed in. The next step to having an effective weekly work session is to rate the quality of the work session at the end. If you've got multiple people, you want to get all of them to rate. We recommend using either a 5-point scale or a 10-point scale. And at the low end of the scale is I strongly disagree that this was a good use of time. At the high end of the scale is I strongly agree. And what you'll do is you'll ask people why they scored the meeting that way. What could we have done to run it better? This is a really critical practice. It's going to help you improve this time, this work session every single week. And in turn, that's going to allow you to raise accountability, have more engagement, have more problem solving together as a team. So don't leave that step out. If this is making sense so far, give me a yes in the comments and make sure you give us a like so that we get a little love from the YouTube algorithm. But the key idea here is that by organizing this work session in this way, you're actually going to set up a virtuous cycle. What's going to happen is every single week, you're generating the wins and the high fives that start to stack up. They don't have to be massive. They're just your week-to-week wins. Everyone's going to see that progress, and that's going to generate momentum. And you're going to be addressing real challenges head on in these work sessions. And that's going to generate momentum. There's nothing like having a team that believes it can overcome whatever challenge comes up. So if this is interesting to you and it's valuable, make sure you hit that like button and share it with someone that you think could benefit. That's going to allow us to help as many leaders as we can and all the teams that they lead. And if this was valuable to you, sign up for our ResultMaps newsletter from the link in the comments. We put out content regularly with actionable tips, interviews, thoughtful articles, and steps you can take with checklists and other resources that make it really easy. And if all this sounds like something you want to get in place in your team and you'd like to accelerate that process, schedule a strategy session and we'll take a look at whether ResultMaps software is right for you. Also, let me know in the comments how you're using weekly work sessions and what your rhythm looks like. How do you run your hybrid and all distributed teams? How are you running teams when they're in the office versus when they're not? We'd love to hear from you. Lastly, I believe every leader has a great vision of the future inside them. With ResultMaps, we'll help you navigate that path faster. That's it for this episode. I'll see you next week or in a strategy call, whichever comes first.